The night was cold, colder than I'd ever remembered. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was the way everything had felt. Distant. His words, once warm and comforting, had begun to chill me in ways I couldn't explain. Still, I stayed. Love has a way of blinding you, and I was nothing if not devoted. He said he loved me, and I believed him. We met under ordinary circumstances, nothing crazy, nothing that would have predicted the horrors to come. A bookstore of all places. I was browsing through old classics when he approached, holding a battered copy of Wuthering Heights. There was something enchanting about him. His smile, his voice, the way he looked at me as if I were the only person in the world. When he spoke, it was as if I'd been waiting my whole life to hear his words. He charmed me effortlessly. We started dating not long after that, and for a while, it was bliss. The kind of love that poets write about, intense and all-consuming. I couldn't imagine my life without him. But love has a funny way of shifting when you aren't paying attention. Slowly, things began to change. The first sign was subtle. So subtle I didn't even realize it was a sign. I thought it was just the honeymoon phase fading, the excitement giving way to routine. He was quieter, more reserved. His once vibrant eyes grew dark. His conversations clipped. Sometimes he would stare at me for long stretches without saying a word. It was unnerving. Still, I ignored it. Maybe it was work stress, I told myself. Everybody goes through rough patches. But it wasn't just that. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find him standing by the window, staring out into the darkness, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight. He wouldn't turn when I called his name. His silence would stretch into the early hours. And then he'd slip back into bed, as if nothing had happened. One night, I woke up to the sound of him muttering in his sleep. At first, I thought it was a dream, the muffled words blending into the quiet of the room. But as I listened, my heart began to race. He was whispering my name, over and over again, but not like someone in love. There was something cold about it, something that made my skin prickle. I lie there frozen, trying to shake the feeling creeping up my spine. When I mentioned it the next day, he just smiled and brushed it off. "You're imagining things, love," he said, kissing me on the forehead, but his eyes didn't meet mine. As weeks passed, I noticed more and more strange things. I found my favorite perfume bottle smashed on the bathroom floor one morning. He said it must have fallen, but there was something about the way the glass had shattered, pieces strewn across the floor like an explosion of delicate shards that made me doubt it. The roses he used to give me, blood red, velvety roses, began to wilt faster than before, their petals curling and blackening at the edges, as if something unseen was draining the life out of them. When I mentioned it, he laughed, though the sound seemed hollow. Then there was the photograph. We had taken it on one of our trips to the mountains. It had been a perfect day, full of laughter and love. But when I found it one afternoon tucked away in a drawer, something was wrong. His face, once smiling and vibrant, looked different. His eyes were darker, the smile twisted, almost as if someone else had taken his place. I wanted to confront him, ask what was happening to us, to him. But every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat, like my body was warning me against it. Instead, I tried to act as though everything was fine. After all, he said he loved me. And love could fix anything, couldn't it? Then, the dreams began. At first, they were hazy, just shadows fitting through my mind as I slept. But they grew more vivid, more disturbing. I dreamt of him standing over me while I slept, his face expressionless, his eyes empty. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with in these dreams. He was something darker. His hands reached for me, cold and unfeeling, wrapping around my throat, tightening until I couldn't breathe. I'd wake up gasping for air, my heart pounding, my skin slick with sweat. Every time I woke up, he was beside me, sleeping soundly. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, after one of those nightmares, I decided to stay awake. I lie there listening to the sound of his breathing, waiting for him to stir. Hours passed, the room thick with silence. until finally, just before dawn, he moved. He sat up slowly, as if in a trance. I didn't dare to speak, didn't dare to move, afraid that if I did, something terrible would happen. He climbed out of bed and walked to the door, his movements stiff and mechanical, like a puppet on strings. I followed him quietly, my heart in my throat. He walked to the basement door. We hardly ever used the basement. It was cold and musty and filled with boxes of things we had no need for anymore. Yet here he was, in the dead of night, descending into the darkness. I stood at the top of the stairs, peering down as if he disappeared into the shadows. My breath caught in my chest as I heard something faint, a soft rhythmic thumping sound like the beating of a heart. What was he doing down there? I couldn't see anything, but I could feel something. An oppressive weight in the air, a sense of dread that I couldn't explain. I should have gone back to bed, should have pretended I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening right beneath my feet. The next morning, I confronted him. "What were you doing in the basement last night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" "You went down there in the middle of the night. I followed you." His face remained blank for a moment, and then he smiled. A small, cold smile that sent a chill through me. "I don't know what you're talking about. You must have been dreaming." But I wasn't dreaming. I knew what I had seen. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there were gaps in my memory. Times I couldn't account for where he was or for what he was doing. Times when I felt disconnected from myself. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. It wasn't until I found the journal that I understood. He had been careful hiding it deep within the basement, beneath layers of dust and forgotten things. I don't know what compelled me to search, but when I did, I found it tucked away in an old chest, bound in worn leather. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded in places, but the words, his words, were clear. It was a chronicle of everything, every twisted thought, every dark desire. Page after page he had written about me, about us, but not in the way you'd expect from a man in love. No, his love was something else entirely. He had been watching me, controlling me, manipulating me. The journal had detailed everything he had done to make me doubt myself, to make me question my sanity. He had planted seeds of fear, slowly unraveling my mind while I slept, while I was awake, while I trusted him. In the dreams, they weren't just dreams. They were memories. Memories of what he'd been doing to me, night after night, while I lie helpless. He had been drugging me, controlling me, using me. But why? Why would he do this? I kept reading, my hands trembling, my heart racing as I reached the final pages. That's when I found the answer. The truth that shattered everything. He didn't just love me. He needed me. He needed me in a way that no living person should ever need another. He had been practicing something dark, something ancient. The journal was filled with strange symbols, rituals I didn't understand. But the words were clear. He had bound me to him, not just in life, but in death. That night, the last night, I confronted him. I knew he wouldn't admit to it, but I had to try. I had to hear it from his lips. I needed to know why. "Why are you doing this to me?" I whispered, standing in the dim light of the kitchen, clutching the journal to my chest. His smile, the smile I had once fallen in love with, was gone. In its place was something cold, inhuman. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low, almost a growl. "Because I can't live without you." And then he lunged. I never felt the knife, not at first. I felt only the pressure, the weight of his body as he pressed me to the floor. His hands were around my throat, just like in the dreams. Only this time, I wasn't going to wake up. I could feel the life draining from me, my vision darkening as he whispered those words one last time. "I love you." But here I am, still standing, watching as he digs a grave in the cold, damp earth. But here I am, still standing, watching as he digs a grave in the cold, damp earth. You see, he killed me, but I'm not gone. He said he loved me, so he made sure I'd never leave him. Even in death, I'm his, bound to him forever. And now, as I stand over him, the shovel in his hands, I wonder, how long before he realizes I'm still here, waiting for my turn.